Prepare yourselves for my greatest invention.
Hello everyone, my name is Tom and welcome back to Let's Talk with Tom, the show where I talk about any show I feel like talking about. And today, we're going to finally talk about Pickle and Peanut. I'm just kidding, we're talking about DuckTales. That would be I'm not that mean. So obviously, this is a show that's been being requested for a very long time on this channel. The only problem being that nobody here actually watched the show until now. For one, this is obviously a reboot of an old 80s cartoon by the same name. Quite honestly, one of the better 80s cartoons I've ever seen, at least from the adventure genre. And as far as I know, there was no larger merchandising campaign like, yo, we gotta sell toys, we gotta sell this, we gotta sell that. There were video games, but that wasn't like the end goal. It wasn't like, yo, we gotta sell these video games. It was a show where they were focusing on the quality of the show rather than a sales pitch. And I think that goes to show why it's one of the better shows of this generation. The reboot is much more modernized. We got social media, we got venture capitalism and technology, and the lighthearted whimsical tone was exchanged for a bit of a combination of like a serious and comedic tone. This is mainly because the serialized nature of cartoons these days demands more depth from the stories that they tell. And let me tell you, there's plenty of depth here in this story. Another big difference is the original had a animation style and look that was true to original Disney cartoons, whereas now it's more of a comic book graphic novel type of style.
Aesthetics.
The lore of the McDuck family is a big focus for this show, primarily focusing on things like Scrooge McDuck's midlife crisis, which thanks to money got pushed back to when he was an old man. Webby helping Dewey find out information about his mother who disappeared shortly before him and his brothers hatched. Not were born. That's a little different, because you can't disappear before you give birth to a child, but you can disappear before a child hatches from an egg. That's an important distinction in my mind. And then like the main story for season 1 is that Webby's friend Lena happens to be the creation or the niece of Magica Dispel, who I believe is a Darkwing Duck character if I'm not mistaken. And she's kind of like a behind the scenes villain up until like the last arc of the first season, and then they do a whole climax there, because that's how you tell stories. One of the few criticisms I have of this show is the fact that they didn't do enough for me, personally, to tell the difference between the triplets. Like, it took me too long to figure out which one was Huey, which one was Dewey, and which one was Louie. Obviously, all three of them were different colors, and their clothes are a little bit differently styled, but oh my god, like, their voices are way too similar for one. And of course they have different personalities, but their personalities aren't different enough to where I can tell the difference between them, like, if I'm not looking for them. If I don't know what I'm looking for, then it just all blends together. Now I'm sure the hardcore fans might think, oh, geez, it's so easy to figure out which one is which. Yeah, I know that now, that I know which one is which. Huey is red, Dewey is blue, and Louie is green. But at first, there was a learning curve. Obviously, this isn't like a thing where I'm like, yo, this show is bad because I couldn't tell the characters apart. Nah. But also, it's not really like a nitpick either. It's just like a thing where I'm like, dog, I wish they had the courtesy to cater to me as an idiot, trying to figure out who is who with no background in this. Because I went in blind, and I was like,
Which triplet am I? It's Bluey?
And it doesn't help that back in the original DuckTales, this wasn't even an issue that you needed to concern yourself with, because all the ducks just had the same personality. It was just a thing where they were all the same character, just slightly differing color palettes. But now I gotta figure out who's who to understand the intricacies of this narrative. Like, wow, way to not insult my intelligence, you jerks. Something I noticed and actually really appreciate is the fact that even though the show is serialized, they still do one-off episodes. Because it's like, the show is called DuckTales, not one overarching DuckTale. It's DuckTales. Like, you gotta tell all these tales of their adventures, the tales of ducks. That's what the show should be about, because that's what the name is. Of course, who am I to force an identity on this show? But this works because they use these episodes to switch things up, and it's such a vast world that they can explore. It's not like Steven Universe, where the stuff that's labeled as filler is usually delegated to Beach City, where it's like, okay, we have an idea of how this is gonna go, probably what's gonna happen, it's not gonna be that crazy. Whereas like with this, the whole world, like anything can happen. Like they can play sports with gods, or they can cause a revolution against an ancient pharaoh, and all do that while planting seeds for the overarching story, even when that specific situation isn't necessarily related to the story. And the fact that anything can happen in this vast universe makes our imaginations as viewers it lets them run wild. Like, we already know Darkwing Duck is canon. Who's to say Goofy can't show up? Especially with the fact that him and Donald have had similar development in recent incarnations, where they've become more sensitive and family-oriented characters. Now, Disney's already confirmed that Mickey Mouse is off limits, but that might be a misdirect, or maybe it's because they want to save him for something special in this. Hell, if we want to go crazy, what if they put Kingdom Hearts in here? What if they do like a crossover special? DuckTales characters are in the game, so I wouldn't be surprised if they at least put a reference or like an Easter egg in the story somewhere relating to Kingdom Hearts. And like if they did do this, imagine like how this would like open up so many doors to like so many Disney crossovers, because it would just expand the universe even more. And I know I'm being ridiculous. I know someone's gonna be like, Kingdom Hearts and DuckTales, is this guy on the drug? Nah, dude, you gotta open up your imagination and not just let it be contained to what you think is possible. It's fiction. Nothing is impossible. Hell, they say that Scrooge McDuck earned all of his money, and he's like a trillionaire. I'll believe Sora is in DuckTales before I believe that. So honestly, this isn't that big of a stretch. It's fiction. Nothing's impossible if you don't want it to be impossible. That's how you get creative. Go crazy first, and then ground it all later. And as awesome as the world is in this show, the characters are also interesting. Webby was transformed from the original token girl of the group to being an active participant in the show and one of the strongest characters in the cast. And it's no surprise, since she's the flesh and blood of Mrs. Beaks, who makes James Bond look like a geek. Then Scrooge McDuck is a really interesting character where he has like these flaws, like greed and, you know, old rich dude stuff. But then he also has like a vulnerable side to this family that he cares about. And it's an interesting evolution of his character where he has to go against his base nature to try and be a better great uncle for Huey, Dewey, and Louie, as well as live up to the hero that Webby sees him as. And Donald, as I mentioned earlier, is very clearly in a goof troop goofy type of scenario. Like, he wasn't in the original DuckTales. He was in for like the first episode, maybe a little bit after that, but incorporating him into the story is very much a creative decision up to this reboot. And the way they decided to go about that was to add a more seasoned, settled down version of the Donald Duck that we know. Of course, he's still used for comedy relief because, I mean, like, how could you not? It's Donald Duck. That's what he was made for. But then they add in like that protective guardian aspect to make his character more well-rounded, which is of course appreciated since Donald Duck is without doubt the biggest star in this show, despite the fact that he's not really in the show that much. And it's actually really weird to look at this as a reboot. Like, we always have a wave anytime that there's a reboot on the horizon of people just grabbing their pitchforks, ready to tear things down and condemn the creators for not being original. I'm sure that despite the strong reception for this show, there are a few of those people out there who just think this reboot is trash and this is part of the problem. People can't make original stories, they keep remaking the same thing. And even if those people are a minority now, when this reboot was announced, people were really skeptical. But let's look at this for a second. DuckTales is a reboot of the original DuckTales. And the original DuckTales is an adaptation of the established Disney character Donald Duck and his nephews. Donald Duck, a character who has been recreated and adapted over and over and over again over the course of almost a decade. Wait, almost a decade? No, almost a century. So how is anyone going to look at this and say, this is a slap in the face to the original? Because what original are you talking about? Are we talking about The Wise Little Hen, the first Disney cartoon that Donald Duck appeared in? Because I doubt most of you have actually seen that. And even if you have, it was very heavily based on the Little Red Hen fairy tale, which Disney did not come up with. In fact, most of Disney's entire brand is based on adapting and retelling other people's stories. You think Disney came up with Cinderella or Snow White, or most of the stories based around the Disney princesses? The only truly original content that Walt Disney has made an impact on the world with is Mickey Mouse and the expanded characters of his universe. And even that, if you watch Shane's video on Walt Disney's partner, even that's up for contention on who actually made Mickey Mouse, because apparently it wasn't Walt Disney. So it's really ironic and funny to me that we even entertain this idea of whether or not Disney is allowed to recreate one of their only original properties to use and air on their networks. And it's honestly just like one of my pet peeves whenever someone looks at an aspect of a story and just says, oh, they ripped off this or they stole from this, because the basis of creation is inspiration. So when there are good reboots like DuckTales that not only reach the level of quality of the original, but also expand on the ideas and the universe originally posed by the original, I don't see a reason reason not to celebrate that over the fact that it's derivative. I think that we should all be able to agree that after a certain point, you have to let go of your blind hate of reboots, so you can recognize how good these things can be, and DuckTales is the perfect gateway drug for that. Anyways, that's about all I got to say. Check out all that stuff. Roll the outro. Thank you for watching Let's Talk with Tom on the Roundtable, but Tom isn't just on the Roundtable. I have my own self-titled personal channel. I have a Twitter, I have an Instagram, I have a Snapchat, I have all that good stuff. In fact, I even have a Tumblr. So, if you're interested in any of that, check that out, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye!